So I'm on the using the tripod that Dibble Craftian so graciously sent me. Let me adjust this a little bit better. The knob for the upsy and downsy is very stiff. So lots going on in the world. I always answer you all when you send me text messages. I want to give a shout out to Maria, New York's finest. Hey, Maria. It's good to hear from you because you had told me that some of your peeps were giving you a hard time. And then you kind of disappeared for a few days. So I was worried about you, and the seriousness of what your situation was. So I'm more than glad to hear from you that you seemingly pulled through whatever it was and you're okay. Lots going on up in New York where some people are being told to stay out of Brooklyn. That it's a no-go zone for those that are supportive of Israel. So we imported this stuff into our country naively thinking that once people got over here that they would give up their passions for their homeland. And Henry Ford, when he had people come to work for him, he had what was called a melting pot ceremony. And people showed up at Ford in their native dress. And then they went through this melting pot on the stage. And they came out in American dress, suit and tie for the men, that kind of thing. So his expectation was, once you get over to America, be American. That's not always the case anymore. We have a congresswoman who came from Somalia, came to America to have a better life. She married her brother in order to be able to stay in the country. And now she's doing everything she can, it seems, to turn America into as much of a third world country as what she fled from, which doesn't make any sense to me. You come to America for the enormous freedoms, and then you turn around and you try and put your idealism on other people, and I mean put it on them big time. Like the students who had to be locked into a room and protected to keep the mob from tearing them apart, and a university. I mean, you go to a university and you're paying thousands and thousands of dollars for an education, and you got to be locked in a room to keep the other students from tearing you apart. I saw one video of a young man who had braided his hair, and a young African-American girl stopped him and, eviscerated him over the braided hair, saying that he had stolen their heritage by wearing his hair that way. When I went to school, I was never one to go with the crowd. And when the hippie movement hit in the 60s, and people at school were like, we're gonna tear our clothes and we're not going to bathe and all that. I was like, I'm not. I live in the richest country on the planet. Why would I tear my clothes up and look like a rag picker? And I didn't. I wore a sports shirt to school, or I wore a suit and tie, or a dress shirt and a tie. I never ever let my hair down like the others did, even some teachers. Some teachers let themselves go to where you'd go to pass in a paper and the teacher smelled like they had just gotten off a garbage truck. And their breath and their smell and everything, and they were making relatively good money, and they just let everything go. I wasn't ever that way. And I didn't do drugs because I had to depend on myself. There's this little teeny nit that's decided to hang out around the camera. So if I swat it, I'm not having a situation or anything. It's just this little teeny nit about the size of a pinhead has come in because they know that winter's coming. So, but I thought for myself, nowadays people go from mob to mob to mob, and it's ironic to me that the very people that are in these mobs chanting for freedom for these other people that attacked people, and attacked civilians in their homes. And one man, hey Dalen, how are you? One man took a lady's baby and held it by its feet and smashed it up against a wall in front of the lady. And then they expect these people not to do anything about it. Now, if it had been me, what I would have done is I wouldn't have done any BOMB at all, since they own the rights to the electricity and the water. That would have been my first thing, is to sanction the electricity and the water and say, when you give us our hostages back, we will turn the electricity and the water back on. I wouldn't have done all of this, stuff of flattening a whole neighborhood and making even more enemies out of people. Hurt for hurt, pain for pain, that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is that when 9/11 happened, these very people were out in the streets rejoicing when they saw the news that those towers went down. They were out in the streets rejoicing when they saw the attack on those Israeli compounds, and they heard about all of the people that got whacked and all of the little babies who were decapitated. They were out in the street rejoicing. So when you back that kind of stuff up, you bring harm your way. That's why it's so important. That's why it's so important to be careful who you vote for. We had a strong president who kept us out of WAR. We had 4 years of prosperity. And then he got voted out because he was mean. And he made mean tweets. So he's got to go because he's mean. And this other joker got voted in who goes to a meeting talking about a world issue, and he grabs a microphone and he says he's got a whole house full of chocolate chip ice cream, and he can prove it. He can show it to you. And that's what he showed to the world stage. And he made a speech that kicked off this whole thing. He was the one who made a speech that said that if the bear country went into the yellow and blue country, that America would stand by and not do anything about it. That speech kicked off this whole mess. That's why I'm not political at all. I'm not political at all. They're both whacked on each side of the aisle. And they do whatever they can to firmly stand on the fence and not commit to anything. So, but getting back to my point, now Mr. Burns is talking about a draft for you young Gen Zs. And if you don't believe me, go to Redacted. Redacted did a very excellent video about how this current administration intends to renew the draft, you know? And one young man got on camera and he said, well, you know, he's not going to be drafted. And if they put him in prison, you know, for 5 years, he's going to enjoy the bottoming, is what he intimated. He intimated that he was a bottom. I mean, just to call it like it is, and that he would enjoy being in prison with all those men. When you're shared by 25, you know, very rough and rugged men, you're not going to enjoy that. I knew a guy who went to prison when he was 14 years old. He accidentally capped a person, and he was very country. And he told me, he said, Will, I thought it was full of salt, but it were lead. So he SHOT this other guy in the face, thinking he was going to give him a buckshot, or salt rather, and it turned out that it was lead, and he ended up removing the guy's face from his body, so to speak. He was 14 years old, and he got out of jail when he was 40, and nothing changed very much. I can tell you, the guy was still just as kooky. But when he told me that, I was a young kid. I was 15 years old, riding along with him in a garbage truck. And when he told me the story about how he had KILLED'd another person, I was looking at him and reaching for the door handle of the truck, getting ready to open up the door and jump out of the truck. I was that scared. And this guy had cuts all over his legs and his back and his arms, you know, from fights. So anybody who thinks that they're going to go to the big house and actually enjoy it is very naive. Because if you're effeminate, they're going to take your food, they're going to take your virginity, and it's going to be rough. And they're going to sell you out for a pack of cigarettes and pimp you. So if I were you young people, I would make sure that my grades were good and that I did everything that I could to stay in college for as long as I could, because they never take the college people. They always figure that the regular working class Joes are the ones that they're going to send over to some WAR to be cut to pieces because they have no value to society. So my advice to you young people, make sure that your grades are good, stack your cash, work hard, stay in college, and do whatever you can do to get the word doctor put in front of your name. There are degrees that you can get online for $349 on up that will get the word doctor put in front of your name. And you need to do that. You need to be a doctor so-and-so. When gas was rationed in 1973, I pulled into a gas station. I was very well dressed, suit and tie. I was dating a nurse who looked like Agatha off of Bewitched. The witch that forgets everything. And she had a nurse's cap on and the blue sweater, the whole 9 yards. And they were rationing gas to $5 a person every other day according to your tag. And back then you didn't pump your own gas. And the young man came up to the car and he said, "Fill her up, doctor." And he assumed I was a doctor. I said, "Yes, please." And he filled my car right up to the tippy top. And I took my nurse girlfriend to the hospital. I didn't feel guilty about it because I had to get her to the hospital. And, the guy didn't ask me anything and I wasn't telling anything. But that's the way society is. It'll always be that way. It will never change. If you think that you're going to be the next rapper, dressing like a rag picker and wearing a scarf or a hoodie and dressing like a thug and sagging your pants and you're going to get respect, these rappers are selling you up the river. They're selling you up the river. You're going to get rag picker treatment if you dress like a rag picker. If you want to be cool, you should be Steve Harvey cool in an Armani suit. I went to a hippie school because I couldn't afford to go to the rich kid school. And my street was right on the line, right on the border. So my friends across the street went to Walt Whitman with all of the Lincoln Continentals and Cadillacs. And I had a 64 Ford Falcon convertible. And I used to have to put a brick under the tire to keep the car from rolling away. I actually called my mother one time and I said, "Can you take my parking brake out of the street?" Because I had left the brick in the street when I pulled off. I had an African-American girlfriend who was an opera singer. And when I graduated in 1971, we were not allowed to go to the prom together. They picked a black guy for her and this weaselly little white girl for me that always had a Kleenex around her nose. Her nose was red as a stop sign. And she was the most miserable date. And her mother made me buy the $150 prom pack of pictures. And she didn't give me one of the pictures, not that I cared. But the mother was handing out the pictures to her friends and her family to show that her plain Jane little girl had actually gotten a date for the prom. But we were forced apart. We were not allowed to talk to each other or dance together. So the whole racist thing is not that old. I can tell you it's just a few years ago when you think of 1971 to now. And it was very unfortunate because I love that girl. She had a beautiful voice. I used to sing in churches and at nightclubs and places like that. We were both interested in singing. A teacher thought that I would be a great opera singer, and she told me that the great opera singers go to some place where it's noisy, like a subway station, and they sing full voice. So one morning when I worked for the garbage company and they were warming all of the trucks up, and they were in the yard warming up, clinking and clattering and all of that other stuff, I broke out into the song from West Side Story, Maria. And I was standing in front of my truck going, Maria, sing it loud, and there's music playing. And the other men thought that I was singing to my garbage truck. And they said, well, he named his garbage truck Maria. But I wasn't singing to the garbage truck. I was just singing full voice. Hey, Lily, how are you? So I used to sing a lot before the accident. And then after the accident, I lost feeling and function on the right side of my throat. So that's where the raspiness of my voice comes from. And it took me a while to relearn how to talk and everything. And then just as I was getting back to square one, the guy came up and punched me in the spine. And now I've been 5 years prisoner in my room, bed bound and wheelchair bound, and having to wear a diaper like a little 2-year-old kid because of not having control from the waist down. But God is good. And I'm fortunate he didn't strike me higher in the spine, or else I would have had to have one of those breathing tubes. So I am fortunate and I am grateful. But fam, unfortunately, a great many evil and ambitious people are in charge of this world, and they are taking us right to the brink because they're naive. They're big boys with big toys that want to push their button. And when it goes down, it's going to go down all at once. The Bible says it's going to go down in 1 hour. And you don't want to be scrambling against thousands of other people going to the one store that's left, trying to get what's left on the shelves. You want to get prepared now. And if you don't believe that, go to Tommy Bites Homestead channel. Tommy is a lady, and she's very smart, and she's got chickens, and she's a prepper, and her husband is a truck driver, and she's making everybody aware of how they're shutting down all these supermarkets all over the country. They're putting the squeeze on people. So I know ever since my rent went up $200 and my benefits got cut $294, I've never eaten so many beans and rice in my life, but at least I'm eating. And we're going to go from a world that's 3/4 food insecure to 1/2 food insecure by next year, because they only grew half the food that they needed this year. And so you're always eating last year's food. And then when that is up, it's up. And I can tell you, fam, as much farmland as China owns in America, if there's ever a famine in China or someplace else, all that food on those trains is going to go out to the ports and be shipped overseas. So Pop drinks a lot of water. I drink 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and I drink 2 big bottles of water. I filter my water, then I boil it and make coffee. And then when the water cools down, I pour it into one of those bottles and drink it. And you'll never have to worry about getting sick from the water. If your city puts out a water alert and you don't hear it, if you filter your water and boil it, you'll never have to worry about squiggly jigglies being in your water and making you sick. And see, old people have good habits, and that's why we're old. We don't take anything for granted. I never drink a soda pop or a glass of milk without smelling it first to make sure it's okay, and taking a little taste before I take a big gulp of something. I always test the food and smell it to make sure it's okay. And that comes from being in hard times, and God always sees you through. Fam, anytime you have a hard time, don't go to 5 different people and ask them. Go to God. Always go to God first. Say, here's what's going on. And you're going to have to quiet yourself. You can't go to God and ask for help and then go downstairs and hop on your game station and zap zombies or pick up hookers with Grand Theft Auto. Once you ask God, you have to quiet yourself, and then he will give you the knowledge in your spirit through the Holy Ghost. And having the Holy Ghost in you does not mean that you palabber, jabber, jibby jabber, and make a fool out of yourself, or hit people in the head, or blow on people. That's all smoke and mirrors. When the apostles talked in tongues, they talked in literal languages. And when it said that they needed an interpreter, they were talking about, for example, you go into a church and they only speak German. Somebody comes in who doesn't speak German. That person needs an interpreter. And he sits next to the interpreter who hears the German. And then he tells the guest, this is what the pastor just said in German. And he tells them in English so the other person can understand. That's what it's talking about, speaking in tongues and interpretation. It's not talking about ha, 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 click, 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 blabber, jabber, jibby, jabber, thus saith the Lord. No, that's not scriptural. So if they do that in church and they dance around and laugh and act like fools, that's what's called a Kundalini spirit. That is not the true Holy Spirit of God, and you need to find the door. So, just telling you, as an elder, it's my job to tell the young people so that they avoid the traps and pitfalls that other people will set for you. Hey, Dominic. So in any case, getting back to what I was talking about, young people, you want to make sure that you get that name doctor put in front of your name any way you can, because things are going to get rough. Things are going to get rough, and it's going to happen in America just like it is every place in the world, because we have the biggest population of Jews outside of Israel in America, and now we have almost the biggest population of Arabs in America, and the two don't get along. They don't get along, and all of that mess is coming to America. So, in any case, I wanted to talk about completeness. A couple of you told me, one said that you felt inadequate around your father. And the thing is, your father might feel inadequate and uncomfortable talking to you, because my family wasn't huggy kissy. My mother did not get along with her daughters, and my father did not get along with his sons. And my father had been terribly abused, and he had a very sick sense of humor. When he did take pictures of my mother or my sisters, they were inappropriate. And, you know, at the time, he didn't know better. He got born again when he was 77. But he and my mother sowed a whole family of dysfunction. My mother lived with her sister and her mother that she hated. My father came up to her at work one day and he said, we're getting married Saturday. My mother, who didn't know my father from Adam, said, well, I'm not doing anything Saturday, so that's fine. And that's how my parents got married. They barely knew each other. My mother didn't want any children. She ended up having 9 children. And she ended up going from the frying pan into the fire. So, like I said, my family wasn't huggy, kissy. We weren't socialized. We were more or less feral, just like a whole bunch of cats living on the street. And I ended up living on the street. And then one of you said that you were dealing with inappropriate sexual attraction. And that can come from the hunger that you get from not knowing a father and having the love of your father and the encouragement of your father, that person will go and try and get encouragement from another man, but they'll do it by having sex with the other man. So it's not a blessing when people march out in the street and they say that they're proud, that they're using their butt for a vagina and they're using their mouth as a urinal for another man. That's nothing to be proud of. I'm sorry. And I don't hate on anybody. I love everybody. But God designed us for better. God designed us for better. And fam, I came from a very bad background of idolatry and incest and verbal and physical abuse. My father crushing out cigarette on me like I was his ashtray, punching me in the face, knocking me down the stairs, and almost killed me by punching me, standing over top of me after he had pushed me down the basement stairs. I was 11 years old. Hey, Muhammad, my sister cornered me in the kitchen over something that my mother had foolishly done, and she held a knife at my belly and she was getting ready to gut me like a fish if I had said the wrong word. So I learned to grow up quick and to stack my money. And when things got bad around the house, I just left. And my parents got to the point where they didn't chase after me. And if I came back, I came back. And I lived more like a guest in their house than a son. And the biggest life mistake I made was when my parents put me out at 15 years old with the shirt on my back They locked the door behind me, went out of the country on vacation because they cared so much about me. I should have gone to the neighbor's house, knocked on the door, and rented a room from her because she was a very intelligent French lady. She had actually been part of the French underground in WW2. She loved me like a son, and she would have seen that I went to college and finished and became a doctor. I went to college driving 2 garbage trucks, working for 2 different garbage companies, and then I would get cleaned up at night, go to college, go back home, sleep for 2 or 3 hours, get up 2:30 in the morning and pick up garbage in the morning like a pack mule. And the guy that I worked for would beat the ever-loving crap out of me if I wasn't fast enough or if I didn't pick up enough garbage. He would put the barrel down, and then he would dump the garbage in the barrel, and then he would hop in the barrel, and he would pack it down with his legs, and then he would put the barrel on my back, and he would say, "Don't drop it, boy. Don't drop it, boy." I was 15 years old. The barrel was bigger than me, a 120 gallon barrel full of dirty diapers and phone books. And it was so heavy one time that it almost tore my finger off my hand where I was carrying the barrel, and this muscle tore. That's how heavy the trash was. And if I didn't keep up with the truck, he would pull up to the next stop without me, and I would have to go half a block carrying that 200 pounds of slop on my back. But I was always courteous, even through the hard times. There were times when somebody would be coming into the apartment, and I'd have the barrel on my back, and I would hold the door open and greet them with a smile. And then when they went by, I'd go out the door and throw the garbage in the truck. And I got to shift my weight. It's hard being bedridden, being in bed 24 hours a day almost. Your body just gets tired of it. But I picked up the old, the deli near the old Congressional Airport in Rockville, and I would carry the garbage right through the dining room, which is illegal now, but back then you could do it. And I was looking at all the people eating all of the delicious food, and I had that hungry look on my face. And the guy who owned the deli took pity on me, and he made me this great big tuna sandwich on Texas toast. And it was wrapped in wax paper. Back then, they didn't have plastic wrap like they have now. They had wax paper or aluminum foil. So he wrapped the sandwich in wax paper. I went out like I was holding a bar of gold. I hadn't eaten for 3 days. And I opened up the door of the garbage truck. And you know how the trucks rattle when they're sitting there? They rattle and vibrate. And I opened up the door of the garbage truck. I put the sandwich up on the dashboard. And before I could hop up in the truck to eat the sandwich, it slid down the dashboard. The wax paper opened up, and my tuna sandwich hit the floor with all the dirt and the garbage and the hair. There was my tuna sandwich lying face down open on the dirt. So I started to cry. I was so angry and frustrated, and I was too embarrassed to go back in and tell the man what happened to the sandwich. So I was muttering and crying, and I picked the bread up, and I took a piece of cardboard, and I very delicately scooped the mayonnaise off that bread. And then I put the cardboard under the tuna, flipped it over, and picked out the garbage, dirt, and the rocks and the hair and slapped that sandwich together. And I was like, you're going down. And so I was eating the sandwich, running into little pieces of hair and rock, but I was that desperate for something to eat. I was that desperate for something to eat that I ate a sandwich that had fallen on the floorboard of a garbage truck. And I was just a little kid on my own. So when you young people, you say, well, you have it so tough because mommy and daddy yelled at you because you wouldn't turn off your PlayStation and come to dinner and eat the dinner that they cooked for you after they slaved all day at a job, trying to keep clothes on your back and food in your mouth and a roof over your head. And they're so mean. They're so mean. And you push away from the table. You don't even say thank you to them for the food. You don't say thank you to God. You don't say thank you to God for the people that slaved out in 90-degree heat growing the food for you. And you run back downstairs and you push your little sister away from the game console and you grab that console and you start playing the game because it's so important for you to have the high score on some dumb video game. And you think you're being mistreated and you're not being respected. And your parents upstairs are having to clear the table and do the dishes before they can go to bed. And they're having to beg you to do your homework so that they don't have to get beefed at by your teacher. And your life is so rough. It just makes me so sad for you. You know, you got to grow up. You got to grow up. You got to contribute to your family. If you want to be respected by your parents, if you want to be respected, you help them do the dishes. You don't have to wait to be asked to take the garbage out. Do whatever you can think of. Vacuum the carpet, pay a couple of bills for your family. If you get some money from your aunt or something, buy your mother and dad a dinner or put gas in the car or something to take the load off of them, and they will treat you differently. They will treat you differently. I always got treated and told that I was trash. And my father at dinner time said, "Bless us, O Lord, for these thy gifts and all of these snot-nosed, worthless children." And that was speaking a curse over his whole family. And believe me, we lived a curse. We lived a curse. So God doesn't play when you misuse his word. The word is a double-edged sword. It can go out and bless, or it can come back and curse you. And my father always spoke curses over us. So the phone's going off, of course. So give me a second. The devil does not like when the word of God goes out and you try and help people. There will be manifestations of people banging on the door, or the phone rings, or people will start arguing next door. It amazes me about the manifestations that happen when you talk about things having to do with the goodness of God and all that other stuff. But fam, the holidays are coming up, and if you're going to press your parents to buy you some expensive gift, like a PlayStation or something like that, when they can barely keep food on the table and gas in the car, and they're paying for food with a credit card, and eventually that means that they won't be able to afford the food, because if they're paying for it on a credit card and they're not paying the full amount back, then they get hit with the interest, and they're not telling you because they don't want to worry you. Fam, Christmas is for little toddler children. And if you're a teenager, you should be contributing to Christmas. You should be buying gifts instead of insisting that they give you expensive gifts. When I was a kid, you got an orange with a candy cane stuck in it. You got a sock full of homemade presents. And every so often, you got a nice gift. And my father usually gave me a nice gift when he had done something horrible to me. He would buy me a nice gift as his way of saying that he was sorry that he had punched me down the stairs or crushed out a cigarette on me or thrown snakes around my neck and almost got me bitten and strangled by snakes, which he thought was hysterical. He thought that was the funniest thing on earth, to throw this big yellow slimy snake around my neck at a picnic. You know, dumb stuff. Dropped me off literally in the middle of a highway, stopped the car, and put me out on East-West Highway in front of my school. Almost get rear-ended by another car and cause a multi-car pileup just so he could be a smart aleck and let me off in the middle of the highway instead of pulling into the school or across the street even. You know, dumb stuff. And that's where all of this turmoil in families comes from. One person does a prank on somebody else. They've had enough of it. They don't take it right. There's an argument. That's why if you stick with things of God that are nice and friendly and loving, you're not going to have all these problems in your family. And believe me, the family problems can get very violent. They can get very violent. When I was 11 years old, it was very common for a family relative to give a child a rifle. 11 years old, I got a .22 rifle. And my parents were smacked. I can tell you. They were angry at my grandfather for getting me this rifle. I wasn't going to use it. I didn't care about it. I thought it'd be nice to hang it up on the wall. In any case, my father used to clean that rifle with it pointing up into my room, like that was some joke. So whenever I knew he was cleaning that thing, I always stayed very quiet in my room upstairs so that he couldn't hear and tell where I was to accidentally, cap me through the floor. Hey, Justin. That's how things work. And my family doesn't like me talking about this kind of stuff. And that's just too bam dad, as my dyslexic mother would say. Too bam dad. But if I had known back then what I know now, I would have moved out when I was 8 years old instead of waiting to be put out when I was 15. And fam, I worked a full-time job. I went to school until 12:30 or 12 rather, walked up to a gas station and worked until 10:30 at night, which was a full day's work, got $9 a day, not $9 an hour, $9 a day. And the men were roughnecks and they played all sorts of jokes on me. I always got called boy, do this boy, do that boy. And I made sure that I was very adult in my behavior. And they would do stuff like they would put grease around the bottom of the water bottle. Back then, water bottles were glass. And so you had a 5-gallon glass bottle of water, which weighed like 30 pounds. And they would say, change the change the water on the cooler, boy. And so I grabbed the bottle and it squeezed up out of my hands and it came back down on the machine and shattered into 1,000 pieces. And so I had to pick the glass out of the water. And all of the men were like, ha, 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 ha. That's so funny. Ha, 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 ha. You know. And so I told him, I said, well, I'm not drinking. I'll pick as much glass out of that water as I can, but I'm not drinking out of that machine from now on. Y'all can drink the water with the glass in it. I'm not touching it. And I put a fresh bottle of water on the machine after I cleaned it up as good as I could, tried to get all the glass out of it. They charged me $10 for the bottle being broken. $10 was more than a day's pay. They did stuff like they made me go clean up the woman's bathroom. We didn't get taught about the birds and the bees back then, and about a woman having her monthly, you know what. So I went to clean up the woman's bathroom, and there was, you know what, all over the toilet and the wall and the garbage can. And I came back, because I was a little kid, I came back, I said, Mr. Costello, you need to call the police. I think somebody's been murdered in your bathroom. There's blood all over the walls and the toilet and the trash can. Oh my gosh, it looks horrible. You need to call the police. And Mr. Costello said, come into my office, boy. Come into my office, boy. And he always sat us on his knee, which was kind of creepy to have a 58-year-old man sit a 14-year-old boy on his knee when he worked for him, you know. And he had a favorite boy, which was Teddy. And he always, whenever he talked to Teddy, he had Teddy sit on his lap, on his knee. And the wife was somewhat of a perv too. I never ever trusted her. But in any case, he told me about the birds and the bees and what happens once a month to ladies. And then he said, now go clean up that bathroom, boy. Go clean the bathroom up, boy. And things were strict back then. When somebody pulled up in a car, you ran out, you had a bow tie and a uniform. You ran out and you put air in their tires and you washed the windshield and you checked their oil. And one day I had my hand down in the engine checking this lady's power steering, and she started the car up because she thought the car had to be running for me to check the power steering pump way down at the bottom of the motor. And I had to carefully watch the fan and the belts and all and take my hand out of the engine without losing it. And I told the lady, and I had to be polite. I said, ma'am, you don't have to start the car to have your power steering fluid checked, ma'am. You know, you didn't dare be impolite back then. So one day, my uniform shirt had pulled out the back of my pants. My hands were all greasy. I didn't want to tuck it in with my dirty, greasy hands. And I sold the most oil and everything of all of the men out on the island, as they called it. I sold power steering fluid and transmission fluid and oil and everything, windshield washer fluid. By the time the day was over, that rack was empty if I was there. So Costello comes out and he said, I told you, boy, tuck it in or cut it off. And he took the back of my shirt and pulled on it and took a pair of scissors and cut it straight across the back. There. You know, now your shirt's not hanging out. Yeah, because I don't have half my shirt. So, and I made mistakes. My uniform got soaked in gas one day. And when I went home, I threw it downstairs for my mother to do it in the laundry. And the shirt and the pants went downstairs and landed next to the furnace, the gas furnace. And my parents were furious. They said if that furnace had clicked on with that oily uniform next to it, could have blown the whole house off its foundation. So I did things that were stupid from time to time, and I learned quickly because I had to. But fam, that's the way it is in life. You have to learn, and I always try and help people. I try and help people so that they're further ahead than I was. I'm going to speak a blessing over those of you that are watching, and I'm going to ask that you have a good day. I pray that the good Lord bless and keep you. I pray he make his face to shine upon you and to prosper you physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially, even as your soul prospers. That's the number one thing you want to prosper is your soul. Poppity pops out.